Hello, everyone. Thank you for taking time out of your day to join us. I'm pleased to welcome you all to the Happy Wellness webinar, Sustainable Nutrition, 7 Tips on Healthy Eating for a Healthy Life, presented to you by Dr. Ashley Russell. I have the prestige honor of introducing you all to Dr. Russell. Dr. Ashley Russell graduated from Southwest College of Naturopathic Medicine in Arizona, where she received training as a primary care physician. She received her BS in Applied Ecology from the University of California, Irvine, where she spent over a year researching the impact of bioremediating plants on Costa Rican soil. She is a naturopathic doctor at and owner of Serenity Natural Health Center in Frederick, Maryland, with a focus on young women's health, and is also co-founder of Love and Power, an organization dedicated to changing women's health care. Dr. Russell is passionate about helping women reclaim their menstrual cycle by alleviating all kinds of menstrual issues, including PCOS, infertility, endometriosis, PMS, and painful or irregular periods. Dr. Russell is a published author and has written for Naturopathic Doctor, News and Review, NDNR, as well as the Frederick Gorilla. She was a professor of genetics and biochemistry in Arizona and frequently teaches classes on various health topics for the Frederick community. In her spare time, Dr. Russell enjoys baking vegan, gluten treats, hiking, and spending time with her dog, Honey. I would like to remind all listeners that this webinar is being recorded, and we will email you a copy at the end. If you have any questions during today's webinar, please enter your questions into the questions box. At the end of the webinar, we will try to answer as many questions as possible. At this time, I would like to turn the presentation over to Dr. Russell, and again, thank you for joining us today.
Hi, everyone. This is Dr. Russell. Thank you for joining us today, and thank you for LuckyVitamin for having me on. So today's presentation is sustainable nutrition. We're going to go through some really basic nutritional ideas, and then I'll have 7 tips at the end to kind of help you on your path to healthy eating and a healthy life. So just before we get into it, since many people probably don't know what a naturopathic doctor is, as Jeremy said, we're trained as primary care physicians, and we learn all the conventional care, but we also learn all the natural therapeutics. And we're a little different than a naturopath, so just know what kind of practitioner when you're seeing. So ask there if someone is a trained naturopathic doctor, who went to a naturopathic medical school, or if they're a naturopath. And as you can see, I am qualified to talk about nutrition because we get tons of hours in therapeutic nutrition. So we have a lot of experience with that. So without further ado, let's talk about sustainable nutrition. So you're probably listening to this talk because you're sick of diets. It seems like every year there's something new. So right now the big one is the paleo diet. In the 90s we had Atkins. Weight Watchers seems to come and go. And I'm sure all of you are sick of, counting carbs or counting calories, and looking for something different that isn't another fad, that's not going to work for the long term. So some problems that we have with diets is, again, they're hard to maintain. We kind of do them for a little bit of period of time, and then we seem to come off of them. They're not individualized. Everyone has to follow the same protocol and follow the same meal plan. Some of them can actually exacerbate health conditions. So in the Atkins diet or high-protein diet can actually make people with kidney issues worse. It can also, if you lose weight too quickly, it can also have negative health effects. And with diets, the main focus is usually weight loss and not improved health in general. So I came up with the idea of sustainable nutrition. So sustainable, as I'm sure you're most familiar with, means able to be maintained over a period of time, because it's not good for your system if you're not eating healthy for a long term. If you're doing a plan for 6 months and then off of it again, obviously that's not going to be the best for your health. Sustainable nutrition is good for your health, and it's good for the planet's health. So we're all interrelated, whether we seem to recognize that or not. Sustainable nutrition focuses on preventing disease. It's not just about weight loss. It's more than that, and promotes happiness and wellness. And then it recognizes the epigenetic effect of nutrition and other lifestyle changes on health. So what is epigenetics, really quickly? So we all know that genes kind of control what diseases we can get or what our hair color is or eye color, but genes aren't the end-all, be-all of disease. So just because you have a certain gene for a certain disease doesn't mean you're necessarily going to get it. So science has now found epigenetics. So it basically is your body's way to influence whether genes are turned on or they're active or they're off and inactive. Nutrition plays a big part of activating or inactivating these genes. And I wrote, as Jeremy mentioned, for the Frederick Corella, so there's a great article which I have on my website about, it goes a little bit more into epigenetics and explaining it, and then there's also a great documentary on Nova about it, but it's definitely a new up-and-coming field. And then the best part about sustainable nutrition is it's implemented at your own pace. So if you want to jump full into it, you can, or if you want to take, which I recommend, baby steps and focus on one tip at a time, you kind of tailor it to your own lifestyle. So let's go over some nutritional basics before we jump into the tips to make sure everyone's on the same page when it comes to nutrition. So I'm sure most of you are familiar with, there's 3 macronutrients or large nutrient groups. So we have proteins, we have carbohydrates, and then we have fats. And then for micronutrients, we have a bunch of vitamins, so B vitamins, vitamin C, vitamin D, and then we have minerals like calcium and magnesium. So you get all this through your nutrition. So for proteins, they are made up of smaller particles called amino acids, and they're just these long chains. And proteins are really important, so they have many functions in the body. So they can act as enzymes, so they control, enzymes help control your biochemical reactions in your body. And then proteins also make up hormones like insulin. So I'm sure you've all heard of insulin with diabetes. You need your proteins to make up your muscles for muscle contraction. And then for transportation of oxygen through things like hemoglobin and your red blood cells, we need protein for that to happen. And then proteins also make up things like collagen, so they're part of the structural part of your body. And then another thing that we don't really discuss a lot in general nutrition with diets and things like that is that there's essential and non-essential amino acids. So there's about 8 essential amino acids, meaning you can't make those amino acids yourself. You have to get them from out in your diet. And non-essential amino acids means you make them, they're not really essential to life. And then within that, we have complete versus incomplete protein. So some types of proteins like meat and eggs have all the essential amino acids versus a lot of plant proteins are more incomplete proteins. So maybe they have 4 essential amino acids, but they're missing the other 4. So some sources of proteins, I'm sure we're all familiar, meat, poultry, eggs, dairy, obviously, cheese, milk, yogurt. Fish, we have salmon, tuna, and then there are also plant proteins. So tofu, legumes, nuts, and seeds also qualify as protein sources. And for all the people that think tofu is the only place that a vegetarian or a vegan can get protein, I made this chart of all the different sources of vegan proteins that are not just tofu. So there's a lot of places that we can get it. So for therapeutics, we can use protein for, to have some health benefits. So it's helpful with obesity, lowering some lipid panels, boosting adrenal function. It can help with trauma or burns. So there's lots of things we can use protein for. And then moving on to fats. So this myth that we have with a lot of the diets, it seems like, is that fat is bad. And I want you to not believe that myth anymore after today. So we need fats for lots of different reasons. So we need it for cell membranes, so basically to keep our cells together. It helps insulate, it helps protect your organs, so if you hit into something, you're not going to damage your spleen. It helps you actually absorb fat-soluble vitamins, so vitamin A, D, E, K, CoQ10, for example, they all need fat to actually be absorbed into your system. We need fats for making hormones, which are very important for your endocrine system. Fats actually taste good, right? If you've ever tried a low-fat diet, it's not very fun. They help produce pro-inflammatory and anti-inflammatory chemicals. So pro-inflammatory maybe sounds bad, but if you get cut, you're going to need inflammation to help stop the bleeding and get the repair process going. And then energy storage. So we store a lot of energy or excess calories in fats. We have those reserves for later, so it's very important. So we don't have a ton of time today to go into all the different kinds of fat. But as you can see, I found this really, I think it's a great visual to see that we have saturated fats, which we tend to think that those are bad, and I would say in a largest portion, if that's all you're eating, it possibly could be, but there is more and more research that doesn't have an association between saturated fats and heart disease, so we're really kind of questioning whether saturated fats are all that bad. And then monounsaturated fats, polyunsaturated, triglycerides, and then trans fats, which are the ones that I would say to definitely avoid. So trans fats, they come from soy, corn, safflower oil, and they're always partially hydrogenated. So that's always going to be the word you see with trans fats to know that it's a partially hydrogenated soy oil, and you will know that that is a trans fat. So why are they so bad? So what are the effects? So lots of terrible things. So trans fats can increase your risk for cardiovascular disease. It increases LDL, which is we would call the bad cholesterol. It lowers HDL, which is your good cholesterol, which helps scavenges. It's also pro-inflammatory, which again, we do need some inflammation for wound repair and things like that, but we don't need excess. It can interfere with membrane transport, so not getting signals across through the cell membrane is unfortunate side effect of trans fats. It also has an increased cancer risk, so it decreases your ability to detoxify things that can increase your cancer risk. It increases insulin resistance. With diabetes being so huge right now, that is a big concern for those people consuming trans fats. It lowers your immune system from functioning. So all those people that have been getting that really nasty cold going around obviously want to avoid trans fats. And then if you're eating high amounts of trans fats, that means you're getting low amounts of essential fatty acids. So you're going to have an imbalance there. So there's many reasons to avoid trans fats, as you can see. And then for the other group, we have carbohydrates, right? So we have the three macro groups. We have proteins, fats, and carbohydrates. So in nature, for the most part, we find carbohydrates in the complex form, where we don't really find a ton of simple carbohydrates in nature as is. So that means it takes longer for your body to break down the complex carbohydrate into a simple carbohydrate. And then something I talk to a lot of people about is that we tend to think carbs and sugars are different things. So to the body, a sugar and a carbohydrate is the same thing. The word can be used interchangeably. They're metabolized the same. Fructose is a little bit different from a biochemical standpoint, but a carb is a sugar and a sugar is a carb. So I think people get confused when we talk about nutrition on that. So again, it's going to be broken down. We go back to a simple sugar. So we have glucose, fructose, which are more simple sugars. And then anytime that happens, we're going to have insulin released from the pancreas, which we need to help make sure the sugar is absorbed properly or the glucose is used. But excess insulin is actually harmful. So you can see insulin will stimulate the production of cholesterol. So if we have too much cholesterol, that's not a good thing. It can make fatty acids. It's pro-inflammatory, again, and excess is not good. And then acts as a storage hormone, so it's going to start storing extra fat. And then if we have excess glucose, it actually is basically sticky and can start sticking to different things and causing issues. So people with diabetes, they can get issues with their kidneys or blood vessels. And it's actually believed that extra glucose or sugar can accelerate the aging process. And there's also additional research, that shows association with cancer and all kinds of things, which we'll go over later. All right, so that's kind of the basics. So let's talk about 7 tips that I've come up with for sustainable nutrition. And again, if you want to pick just one tip to integrate and then go from there, I think that's a great way to start. So for tip number 1, I want you to think about where your food comes from and where your food goes. So let's explain what that means. So where does your food come from? Is it local? Is it by a local farm? Do you have a relationship with the farmer? Or does it come from far away? Is it non-seasonal and will have to be shipped from, say, South America? Is it out of a box or out of the ground? So is it something that's so processed that it took, how many steps to get into a box? Or is it something that's a whole food, just like broccoli or something that's straight out of the ground? Organic versus non-organic. So I'll show, I have a bonus tip on the next slide, but organic food, is going to be less hard on your body because your body has to process all those pesticides and things like that. And then is it high on the food chain or is it low on the food chain? So on the next slide I have, there's a process called bioaccumulation, and basically, as you can see on the upper part of the picture, over time as things grow, right, they're going to accumulate more toxins, and we're talking specifically about toxins. However, it is affected by the food chain as well. So as you can see, we have these little, I think these are shrimp or something. So they're on the low end of the food chain, right? So they didn't accumulate that much toxic material, but then the fish are going to eat those shrimp, and they're going to accumulate all the toxins the shrimp have eaten. And then we have a seal that's going to eat the fish, and it's just going to keep accumulating more toxins. And then the polar bear, obviously you wouldn't eat a polar bear, but if that eats the seal, it's going to have even more toxins. So the lower you eat on the food chain, the less amount of toxins you're going to accumulate. So same with, a cow. So a cow is going to eat the grass. The grass has very little toxins in it. But the more the cow eats, the cow's going to accumulate all those toxins from the grass, and then we eat the cow, and we're accumulating all those toxins from the cow. And then the bonus tip I was talking about, so organic, unfortunately, is more expensive, and it's hard for a lot of people to afford that. So the Environmental Working Group, or EWG, they have a list that they publish each year, and they have one called the Dirty Dozen. So basically, it's the top 12 foods that have the most pesticides, and they retest these each year. And then they have the Clean 15, so they're the most, I guess, pesticide-free produce that they found. So if you're going to, definitely try to buy the Dirty Dozen as organic. And then if you don't have to worry so much about the Clean 15 if you're not able to afford organic. And again, they have lots of great resources on their website. And the other part of that, remember where your food comes from and where does your food go? And I don't mean the toilet. I mean, where do you store your food? Are you storing it in chemicals, like plastics and things like that? So there's chemicals not only found in food, right, and pesticides, as well as air and water, but the plastics and pipes and toiletries and all kinds of things actually absorb into your food. So mainly I'm thinking about plastic with storage. And they can cause disruption to your endocrine system. So it's best to avoid those plastics. And you can store them in, glass Tupperware is really useful. And then another thing to think about is composting the scraps for a better quality soil. Over the years, unfortunately, the soil has kind of been depleted just through our farming processes. So if you can grow food at home, then you really know where it comes from, right? And then if you have composting your scraps, you can actually improve the condition of your soil for even better gardening. All right, so that was tip number 1. Tip number 2, I tell so many people, so read labels always. Always, always. If there's one thing you can take away, always read the ingredients labels. This is so important. So sugar, if you look on a nutrition label, where it breaks down the grams of sugar, I mean, that can mean anything. You don't know where that sugar is coming from. And dairy and fruit and refined sugar all act a little differently. And then what's kind of scary is that trans fats can actually be in the ingredient list and not listed in the label. because the FDA allows food companies to be off in their accuracy of labeling. So I have an example of that to show you. So this, I think this is the Marie Callender's croutons or something like that. So as you can see on the left here, it says 0 grams of trans fat. On the packaging, it says 0 grams of trans fat. So if you saw this, and you didn't read the ingredients, you would think this is a great thing to buy, if croutons were a great thing to buy. But if you actually look at the ingredients, if you remember from the trans fat slide, that the third ingredient is partially hydrogenated soybean oil. And what does that mean? That's trans fat, right? So because there's less than a 20% discrepancy between 0 and what they're actually finding in there, they're able to say it has 0 trans fat. So again, if you read the label, you would know, or sorry, the ingredients, you would know this is not a great product to buy. And then, again, this is where reading ingredients comes in. So we have the Zone Perfect Nutrition Bar, right? It sounds great, perfect nutrition. But then if you actually read the, and you look, oh, okay, it's got 15 grams of protein, looks pretty good. And then we have all these things, soy protein nuggets, fractionated palm kernel oil, let's see, protein isolate, xanthan gum, so many different ingredients. To me, this is not a perfect nutrition bar. Again, so just make sure you read the ingredients. And I love Lara bars. This has 4 ingredients in it. They're really natural bars. So again, looking, what's in the food, and I think when you can pronounce the ingredients in the food, that makes it even better. All right. So again, tip number 2 might be, to me, the most important tip. However, eating mindfully is also super important. So that's tip number 3. So mindfulness, we need to think about when we eat. So we're Americans, right? We're always on the go. We're always busy. We're never just sitting and eating. I mean, how many of us eat and work on other stuff? We eat, we watch TV. We're eating on our phone while we're on our phone looking at, emails and things like that. We're never actually just taking time to eat and sit with our food and kind of be in the moment. And there's actually different kinds of hunger that people don't realize. You can have food hunger. You can also have hunger for social interaction. So say you were trapped in a conference room all day and you were able to talk to other people, you might be hungry at the end of the day for social interactions. We have eye hunger, so my eyes are bigger than my stomach. And then sometimes thirst actually can feel like hunger to us. So if you're ever feeling what you think is hunger, you just take a second to ask, what do I really crave right now? And really just kind of sit with yourself and see, what are you actually needing? Are you lonely? Are you, thirsty? What is it? Are you actually hungry for food? And then there's some steps to eating mindfully. So first you want to make an event. So, set your table, light some candles, make it something we're celebrating, and then actually look at your food, plate it nicely. Maybe have the vegetables on one side and your protein on the other side with a little bit of rice or something like that. And look at the different colors, look at the variety of colors on there and the textures and things like that. And then smell your food. So take a moment just to actually inhale the aroma and then say thanks or grace or whatever you want to say. So actually acknowledge the food. And then just take one bite and observe the way it feels in your mouth and the different tastes and flavors. And then chew, and make sure you chew a lot. This is actually part of the digestion process, and a lot of us rush through it. And then once you swallow, kind of check in and see if you're still hungry or if that was enough for you. Maybe you just needed one bite. And then go for another bite and pretty much repeat the same process from taking a bite and observing from there. And the benefit is, you'll notice actually over time, if you do this, you will eat less, but you'll feel more satisfied, which is kind of amazing to think about. So if you want to know more about this, I think this is a really great book that kind of walks you through Mindful Eating by Jan Chosen Day. And then tip number 4 is planning ahead. So planning meals, again, we're super busy people. We have a lot going on in our lives. So making sure that you take time ahead of time to plan, what day you're going to cook, what day maybe you're going to do prep work for your meals, knowing what your schedule looks like. So knowing, I only have time, maybe I can make extra to have leftovers for the next day. And then make a list for the grocery store. Make sure you know what kind of food you're buying. And again, it should be, whole foods. Know where it's coming from. Is it out of the box? Are you going in the middle of the aisles of the grocery store, or is it more on the edges? Are you getting the actual fruits and vegetables and things like that? And then don't go to the grocery store hungry, because mind's going to start kicking in. You'll start craving more of those sugary products. So definitely eat something healthy before you go to the grocery store. And this is great, the planning, the person's done on the right. The only thing is, again, it's in plastics. Maybe if they put that in glass, this picture would be a lot better. All right, number 5 is mix it up. And I kind of have 2 different plays on this. So mix it up one way, meaning variety is important. So you want to eat the rainbow, right, of vegetables and fruits. So they have different kinds of antioxidants as well as vitamins and minerals. So it's definitely important to get variety. However, mixing it up is also important for another reason. So there's a lot of autoimmune conditions as well as other conditions, lifestyle conditions going on right now that we're seeing a huge increase of. So for example, autoimmune diabetes type 1, the different IBDs, psoriasis, arthritis, Hashimoto's. I mean, that's just a very small list. So what we've seen is that a lot of people are kind of eating these same foods over and over again, and their body is actually getting sensitive to it, and that's creating an autoimmune type condition. And so what I have a lot of people do is to actually make sure that they're rotating their diet and getting different kinds of foods so they're not getting sensitive to it. And people do elimination challenges and things like that to see what their sensitivities are. So the common allergens that we tend to eat so much of, and that's why we're sensitive to it, is soy, wheat and gluten, corn, dairy, citrus, and nightshades, so like tomatoes or eggplants. So again, some things that you want to make sure you mix it up and you keep adding different foods and trying different things and not eating the same thing every day. All right, so tip number 6 is to reduce your sugar intake. So more and more studies have found that sugar actually acts like a drug. Some studies have even said it's more addictive than cocaine or even some hardcore drugs. So it has that effect on the brain, and it makes it really hard to not crave things like sugar or to eat them. However, there's so many diseases, this list is not exhaustive, that's associated with a high refined sugar intake, so diabetes type 2, Alzheimer's, polycystic ovarian syndrome or PCOS, cardiovascular disease, even things like fatigue, which how many of us have fatigue, anxiety, depression, obesity, obviously tooth decay, we know that for a long time, but non-alcoholic fatty liver disease, migraines, tension headaches, PMS, candida, and high blood pressure. They're all associated with refined sugar intake. And just to say about that, if you avoid sugar for that first week, if you really cut it out and kind of go cold turkey, it's really not that bad after the first week, because again, it's like a drug. So once you get it out of your system, your body feels much better. All right, and then the last tip is hydration, which is kind of nutrition and kind of not. But I find so many people that come in and see me, they don't drink any water, or the only kind of liquid they have throughout the day is, coffee and maybe a cup of water. So water is super important for a lot of different biochemical pathways, as well as making sure your food, you're not getting constipated and your food is able to digest properly. So aiming to drink about half your body weight in ounces of water a day is what people should be shooting for. Obviously, talk to your doctor to get a more personalized goal. And then I really like this, minus the plastic thing. But for some people that have a hard time drinking water, calculating about how much you need to drink and then breaking that up into different times of the day so you know how much you need to shoot for each one. So I thought this is a cute idea. All right, so those are the 7 tips. So again, think about where your food comes from. So is it higher on the food chain? Is it lower on the food chain? You don't want to bioaccumulate too many toxins. Is it out of a box? Did it, have to go through 5 million steps to be processed and turned into that, food substance in the box? Or is it fresh? You can identify it as broccoli or Brussels or things like that. And then think about where your food goes, so making sure you're storing it properly in, non-plastic type containers and not reheating it in plastic. And then number 2, again, my top tip, always read labels and make sure you know what the ingredients are of what you're eating. Eating mindfully, so taking a minute to kind of check in with your body and make sure, if you're actually hungry for that food. And then when you eat the food, make sure you enjoy that process. Planning ahead, so making sure you plan your meals so you're able to stick to, eating whole foods. And then mixing up, so making sure you get variety in terms of vegetables and fruits and things like that, but also making sure you're not eating the same thing day in and day out. And then reducing sugar is tip number 6. And then tip number 7 is hydrate. So again, just take it one step at a time. So if you want to pick one tip and start with that, I think that's great. I'm all about baby steps. So I think you kind of do what you can and go from there and build on good habits. So thank you for listening. I offer free health tips, recipes on my newsletter. You can sign up on my website at serenitynhc.com. I'm actually sending December's newsletter out tomorrow, so you still have time to sign up to get that. And then I do offer free 15-minute consults for people that are interested in becoming patients. So if you want to schedule, feel free to do that. So I think now we have questions. We can ask that.
Hi, everyone. Thank you, Dr. Russell. That was really informative. We did get some questions. One of the first questions was if the charts will be available, but after the presentation. I don't think they'll be available, but we are sending out a video with this recording, so they can just listen to the video again to get the charts and see what they said. And then the questions for you. The first question. All right, go ahead,
do they mean charts? No. Do they mean charts like the vegan protein chart, or because that's actually on my website? If people are interested in that. But yeah, if they want the PowerPoint, yeah, just watch it again.
Yeah. All right. The first question is: I have read every diet book and nutrition book there is. How does one discern what to eat? Do I eat paleo, vegan, vegetarian, raw, carb-free? And then how do you realistically decide what is the best sustainable way to eat for a lifetime? So I think you addressed that a lot in your presentation, but if you could just, maybe give a little brief summary, that'd be great.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that, again, there's so many different kinds of diets out there. I think following the tips are really helpful, but it sounds like for this question, probably eating mindfully and really listening to what your body, needs. So if you eat the sugar or that kind of stuff, or, follow the vegan diet or whatever, is this, listen in when you eat your meals and see if this is actually something that, your body is helpful to your body. But yeah, I think, and also, individualize, to make sure that you're kind of really individualizing your nutrition, and you can obviously always work with a naturopathic doctor to help you kind of figure that out as well.
All right, great. Thank you very much. We had one question that just came in. What are your thoughts, if any, about an alkaline diet?
Well, I think an alkaline diet, from my understanding, is more based on fruits and vegetables and not so much, animal proteins and things like that. So again, it fits into more, for me, the bioaccumulation than the alkaline diet. But again, it's another diet. So if you want to follow a different diet, go for it. But again, I don't like diets for that reason. So
yeah. All right. can you provide maybe some examples of healthier sweets that, might be okay to include in a diet every now and then?
Yeah, so, everyone, and something I didn't mention, which I wanted to, is that I think if you, once in a while have a cookie or something like that, it's okay. I think it goes part with eating mindfully, so making sure that you enjoy that cookie and you don't feel guilty about it. I think I have a lot of people, they say, oh, my cheat day, and I discourage them from saying that because there's, a level of guilt associated with that. But if you are going to have a sweet, there's natural sweets, things like dates, and different kinds of fruits and things like that. So I think if you eat mindfully as well as kind of reduce your overall sugar intake, you actually will enjoy that treat more and realize how sweet it is naturally. There's lots of also great, just Google, low sugar baked goods or things like that. But again, I think it's more enjoying and kind of being in the moment of eating that treat to really realize how sweet it is and how much, maybe you don't need the whole dessert thing.
All right. Great. We had another question that just came in. Is it okay to cut out dairy completely? And if you could maybe give some replacements for calcium if they are eliminating dairy from their diet.
Yeah, so I mean, there's lots of, sorry, the question was about replacements for dairy, right?
The question is, one, is it okay to completely cut out dairy?
Oh, completely, okay.
And then the second was, if they do, what are some good replacements for calcium if they eliminate dairy?
Okay. Yeah, I mean, obviously there are people that vegan that don't eat any dairy products, or people that are lactose intolerant and avoid dairy in general. So I don't think there's anything wrong with that. Again, you should probably talk to your doctor about that. But dairy is not the only place we get calcium from. Kale and broccoli also have a lot of calcium in it, as well as some other vegetables. So it's definitely possible to get that from non-dairy sources. And then what, they want to know dairy alternatives, is that?
Yeah, they were just wondering if they did stop dairy, what are some?
Oh, I mean, there's all kinds, it depends on what you're looking for. There's like coconut yogurt now, not just soy milk, there's cashew milk I saw in the grocery store. There's tons of dairy alternatives that even, like the chains like Walmart and things like that are starting to carry, which is really exciting.
All right, great. That's the end of the questions. So please enroll in our upcoming webinars. Our next one will be Flashes, Flushes, Brain Fog, Oh My, Natural Support for Perimenopause on December 8th at 2 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, presented by Dr. Nina Manappan. Join Dr. Manappan as she focuses on understanding the transition and symptoms of perimenopause. She'll discuss the endocrine system and hormone disruptors that contribute to imbalances. To enroll, please go to www.LuckyVitamin.com and search webinar in the search bar. I would like to thank all of Lucky Vitamin's customers and Dr. Russell for joining us on today's webinar. Have a great day.